Well, at arXiv, we're using MKDocs for our help in various documentation. And I think one of our developers is working on hooking that up with Git pages. And I'm just wondering if you looked at that one at all.
I've used MKDocs and I set up a sort of sample page even using MathJax on it and tried to persuade the TUG organization to use something like that for their website, and they weren't interested. And because they weren't interested, I sort of stopped being interested. MKDocs comes from the Python stable. It seems to be written by a pretty talented developer and has a good community around it. I think that's really important. There's a site called Read the Docs, which will watch your GitHub repository and rebuild the documentation and publish it for you whenever the documentation changes. So that's similar to what GitHub does. And I think that's a very important part of the model. I don't think the archive should replace your, I don't think the archive should provide Git hosting and update the published paper every time you do a push to it. But there may be some sense in providing a Git form of submission to the archive.
That's interesting.
And I'm saying that particularly in the context of getting accessible outputs, where if you're wanting to generate HTML output as well as PDF output on the archive, then you want people to be able to generate those outputs on their own machine.
Right, exactly.
And to do that, you need a whole bundle of files. And uploading them through a form won't work. And uploading a zip file is sort of second best when you could do a Git push, if you like. And so that we're getting into technical details there, but I think one of the big issues from the technical side regarding accessibility on the archive is the point I'm repeating myself here, the same experience on my PC as is used in the archive. Now, the archive manages that with the TechLive distribution.
Right.
But in order
there are some different packages, but yeah.
Yeah, the TechLive distribution provides all the packages that are available. So you have a sort of TechLive distribution on the archive and the stuff comes in. But if, for example, the pretext people publish an accessible book on calculus and you want to be able to rebuild that book from source on the archive, then there has to be the shared environment that includes things that never get into TechLive, such as XSLT processors. So I see the accessibility, the demand for accessibility. Now you've avoided that by sort of saying, oh, we'll use LaTeX ML from Bruce Miller and Dan. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But we're not expecting people to run it on their own machine. But the creation of a standard environment was something that is crucial to Don Knuth's vision of tech. I'm sure most of us know that in the 70s, in the pre-version of tech, he found that page breaks were changing, line breaks and page breaks were changing from one machine to another. And he realized that floating point arithmetic was being used in a place that affected the line and page breaks. And so he stripped all of that out, and there is no internal dependence anywhere on floating point arithmetic. So the page breaks and the line breaks occur the same on every machine. And that was something that was really very, very important to him. And it's that uniform computing environment, I think, that was so crucial to the success of tech. And the archive, if it's going to deal with its accessibility, again, needs a uniform computing environment. Tech Live, which the Sebastian Ratz was my colleague on the UK Tech Committee and Tech Community, had such an instrumental role in, was a tremendous advance in creating a shared uniform environment for tech documents. And the fact that it was on a CD or a DVD means you could say, you put this DVD in and that's the stuff we're going to use. It sort of provided a reference point at a time when the internet was slow. So I think that is one of the technical issues that's could potentially, if not resolved, would block accessibility. It won't by itself enable accessibility, but it could block it.
So why couldn't you run LaTeX ML locally?
You can, but I followed some advice on the internet and installed Ruby and Jekyll completely unsuccessfully on my main Fedora installation. I was close to tearing whatever remains of my hair out. And I had limited time and I thought, well, I'll try to use the DistroBox thing, the DistroBox mechanism. And there, I'm in a standard environment, namely a Docker image. And if I make a mistake, I could throw it away. And it worked so well that I was actually able to reproduce it for you today. That's why one of the things I was quite keen, one of the reasons I was quite keen to do that. But that is a fairly new thing. Previously to DistroBox, which builds upon Docker and Podman, but DistroBox makes it much, much easier. Previously, the only way to do that was to use a full virtual machine, which is slow and hard and very disconnected from your real machine. Because it is a true virtual machine, you have to SSH in to do anything, for example. It's sort of, whereas DistroBox, really easy to use. And it gives you the right sort of thing. So I sort of see a bit of a revolution in packaging going on. And there's something called Flatpak and other things that sort of give you one folder that you install, and that gives you your fixed environment. And DistroBox is somewhere between the two. It's somewhere between having the full installation that is standard and having a virtual machine and having a package. So it may be that some sort of specification for a DistroBox is a sort of halfway house to having a full Flatpak. And somehow providing the environment that authors use is one of the things, authors not being able to use the environment that the archive would like them to be able to use is, I think, a problem. The archive wouldn't work if it was not possible for users to install tech on their machines. And an accessible archive wouldn't work if they couldn't preview the accessible outputs on their own machine. So I see that as a sort of technical problem, but I think the best way to deal with that technical problem is in terms of a number of articles and a number of authors and a number of readers who want accessible outputs, so that it's always done in response to some identified need of some identified person, even though the identity of the person may not be known, may not be public. That's me going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're in the early stages now, but I mean, the archive with a 5 group, I mean, you know, they're generating this HTML, and I think Shamsi said like 72% converts without any errors. And I think their site says that 97% of archive papers generate something. So, you know, the question is integrating this. I mean, we've been talking about adding the HTML review to the submission process. But one problem is, like, if they don't like that HTML, how do they fix it? You know, I mean, it's easier to do on the LaTeX side. I think you've got more control. I think with the code that the arXiv with a 5 group is writing, they're writing a lot of custom routines that deal with certain package conversions, as I understand it. So it may be more difficult for the submitter to get the HTML to how they want it, so
it's much easier for me to make suggestions and give good advice because I represent only one user. Whereas you have tens or hundreds of thousands.
Right.
David, can I ask, so is what you're thinking is that they submit a tech file, say, it's on the fly, it's converted to HTML, and they go in and they say, yeah, this is good, this is my submission. Is that the idea?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't thought it through completely. I mean, like I said, the issue is if they don't like it. If it's one of these papers that's not within the 72%, do we have them just reject it? Or do we have alternate tools that try to generate, maybe we have a set of tools and they pick the best one. I mean, so there's a lot that we're thinking about.
Maybe you could have a program for let arXiv authors to enroll in if they want to, so that they can trial this technology.
Yeah.
But it's very similar to, if you look at a normal submission, and if you go to a publisher, and if I submit my, of course, 99% is Word files. If I submit, what happens is in the system, in the submission system, it's converted on the fly to a PDF, and the authors see that PDF. Then the authors say, "Yeah, that looks good. That's my submission." So, and if that's the case, that means they've accepted that basically. Now, and you're looking for something like that, but yeah, but in the it's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you submit a paper to arXiv, the last step is the preview step. So you're supposed to look at your PDF, review it, and then submit it.
Yeah, but of course that's easy because PDF, PDF from tech gives you PDF. So
absolutely, yeah.
There's no problem there. The problem is, so what I'm thinking is that the author submits, in principle, just thinking aloud. They come in, it doesn't look right, say, on the HTML, but they have some sort of interaction to go in and fix it. And authors are willing to spend a bit of time to fix because this is the work they've spent a year doing. And if they do a little bit of work, maybe that can be fixed. And then you have ideally accessible content.
Right. And that's the part I don't know how to do right now.
Sure.
You have this tool that's generating HTML and it doesn't do it right.
Correct. Yeah.
It generates something that the submitter doesn't like.
The thing is, there are different ways of creating the HTML as well. Going from a LaTeX, there's a simple way, which is, I can't remember which does what. LaTeX ML. There's
Text to HTML.
Text to HTML. There's Tech for HT. Some of them just are sort of Perl scripts, so some sort of conversion script, which is actually quite difficult because it's got to have a look at it's got to work out what the macros are doing. But some of them use the tech engine, so it goes through the guts of tech, and it comes out so that tech has already digested most of the complications, to put it bluntly. So it's a lot. It's a complex problem, but it's definitely worth doing. and not just for arXiv, but for other publishers. Other publishers have the same problem. When they get a late tech file, I mean, it's our business, to be honest with you. We still do typesetting. So my company, we do typesetting. We have 100 people sitting there cleaning up LaTeX files, cleaning up Word files. And really, I'm on record as saying, guys, please put me out of business. This is nuts. We shouldn't spend doing, and I really mean that. So we should have a system where the author maybe does a little bit more work. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking of, rather than having, for want of a better word, cheap labor to clean up the mess. And I know this is being recorded. That's fair enough. I've said it before.
I looked at the arXiv a few times, and something that struck me was it's a bit of a palaver to go from the arXiv to the arXiv because there are no links that way. And I sort of understand the whys of that much better now, which is the arXiv is an archive, and anything that's published is not unpublished. So if there's HTML output that is hosted by the arXiv rather than one of its experimental domains, it has to stay there in perpetuity, just as the PDF, it has to stay there as long as the PDF stays there. The author can't say, "Oh, I didn't like that HTML, please delete it." And they can't even say, in some sense, there's an error in the HTML, change it, except by making a new version of the publication. So that is the sort of exacting standard that the arXiv has. And the squaring the circle problem is to keep that exacting standard and allow the Wild West of HTML, LaTeX to HTML to take place.
Right.
A sort of halfway step would be to provide on the arXiv a link to the arXiv, but with a blocker that warns that you're now leaving the supported domain and this is entirely experimental and may not continue. But that would by itself, I think, give the arXiv a tremendous exposure that it previously doesn't have. And at some point that, I think, would have to come. There's another thought I had, which was that some papers are quite important. The papers written by the Fields medalists this year, for example. And it might be helpful to do a high quality conversion of a number of papers every month as technology demonstrators. And if that works, then you could expand it to allow external people to come in and do the conversions, but with appropriate quality checks. And I guess you'd have to have the approval of the author of the paper as well. But something like that, we've got to get from 0 to 1 or from 0 to 0.1. And I think it's that small infinitesimal increment from 0 to 100. If we had 100 accessible papers on the arXiv.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the arXiv with a 5, it's experimental. It's part of arXiv Labs. I mean, you can get there, basically by changing that X to 5. But I think it's the 72% success rate that is the concern. I think at this point we have a list of maybe 7 or 8 other tools that claim to do this. So I think we may have to evaluate some of these other tools. I mean, unless we have some experience here that folks have compared.
I think
Yeah, go on, Jonathan. You go ahead.
I think we've got to work at it at both ends. We want something that works for lots of papers because it's an enormous problem, and we've got something that works on high quality or adequate quality because that's also a requirement. And you know, you have engineering prototypes and production prototypes. Are they?
Okay, so the ideal, if you go to 0 to 100, if you like, the 100 and what, you know, what is to have, right, let me just go back. I gave a presentation, which is recorded, is on video. I said, okay, we all talk about the version of record, but what is, publishers, what is your format of record? Okay, so if you go to a site, you got HTML and you click and you get the PDF. And you can sometimes you can get the XML if it's very open. You might have other formats, EPUB, etc. Now, what happens if 10 years down the line you've got you know, an X squared in one paper, and it's an important paper, Jonathan, and it's X cubed in the PDF, right? And it's X squared in HTML. I go to the publisher and say which one is right, and the publisher might say, well, I don't know, and the author's passed away, I'm afraid. That's a major problem. Yes, Jonathan.
Okay, so it's an important mathematical paper and it's an important result.
Yes.
And we're writing it 20 years from now, so things have moved on.
Yes.
And the proof will be written using a proof assistant, such as Lean. And Lean is a piece of software that will mathematically check the proof.
Okay. And
the version of record of the proof of the result is the Lean source file, just as the version of record for the tech program is the tech source file.
Wait a minute, wait. You Dan, I don't know about Lean.
It's nodding. David is indicating agreement with me.
I think he's just being polite. No, hang on. Let me put Lean aside. Let's take mathematics. Let's suppose it's a physics paper. Suppose it's a, you know, we don't have these proof, etc. I've written a paper on a, you know, microbiology paper, and somewhere along the line, the HTML is the, all you've got is the XML. You might have XML, but you got HTML and PDF that the client can see, the reader can see. There's a difference between these. Now, I believe that there should be a format of record. And if I can go further, I believe that format of record should be the sort of the, you know, granddaddy of format. It should be something like XML, which is not a visual thing, but it's tagging content, if you like, as near to semantics as possible. That's the ideal. When you have XML, and I'm not selling our services here, but the way we do it, we convert everything to XML. We press the button, the HTML comes out, press another button, the PDF comes out. It is virtually impossible for these, because it's toothpaste out of the same tube, to have any difference. So that's the ideal we want to get to. Okay. So, but of course, the arXiv, you know, it's not a you know, expensive publication. You don't want to spend money doing this. You don't want people, you know, out in India or the Philippines cleaning up manually. We need a system where the tech file, maybe with a little bit more work from the author, can be structured into something like XML or similar to XML, whereby then from there we can go out. It's just an idea. At least that's what I'm doing with you know, with other things, with other issues.
Do you want to come in, David?
Well, I mean, it seems like the tech to PDF is, you know, it's been worked on for a period of time, so that's working well. I think, you know, it seems like there's this, the HTML is, at least with the arXiv folks, it's relatively new. I mean, the other issue that we have at arXiv we have papers that have been generated on maybe 6 or 7 different versions of tech. And many of the older versions don't have, I mean, we started with T-Tech. So, and arXiv tended to collect a lot of packages that were not included in these standard distributions. And we still have some packages in the Tech Live that we have an additional tree with it's gradually disappearing, but it's still there. So I think that makes it more of a challenge in generating the HTML files. So
we need a good system. We need a good a scalable system. arXiv is such an important archive, if you like, that it would be good to find a good system to give you everything, which is the HTML and the PDF, and guarantee that they match. That's the other thing. There's 72%. How are they 100% matching? Are there any differences, etc.? That's the other thing.
We haven't checked that. I mean, I believe the 72% are, that's referring to conversions that do not generate exceptions or errors. But that doesn't, mean that they're perfect. So we may have to do something. I think we're leaning towards trying to get something out there. We may have to put some disclaimers on it that, this is like in the early stages. But there's, we have this effort on accessibility that is kind of driving us at this point.
I think it would be worthwhile revisiting the process by which PDF was introduced and became an archival standard, because it has gone through a process, and Adobe put an enormous effort, I believe, into achieving that process, both in terms of technical standards and in terms of promotion, community building, associated tools, all sorts of other things. And it has achieved legal recognition, which is one of the important things, that it can be used in legal systems. So it'd be worth looking at that process and then say, how can we get a similar process for XML? XML by itself has got a lot of advantages, but without standard tools, if you like, for their rendering, just as PDF wouldn't work without Adobe Acrobat to render it, because you can't read PDF as a file, as a native file. And in a certain sense, you can't read XML as a native file. And even if you could, there's a sort of lot of ambiguity about what the semantics are, if you like. Whereas PDF captures fairly closely a visual experience that people have. And that's what people think about a fixed thing, is they think we want a visual experience because we read with our eyes.
Absolutely right. But PDF is the complete, in a way, it's the complete opposite. PDF is, I love PDF. People say, oh, forget PDF, etc. PDF has been extremely successful. It's exact, we like things. People like things. People like to, you remember something the way it was. It doesn't change. It's perfect. But unless you do something to it, it has no semantics. It just looks right. Yeah. So PDF is a visual representation. That's it. And of course, after the fact, 30 years after it was, invented, we are trying hard to make it somehow semantic or accessible, so that if you can't see, you can read it. So we're going the other way around. XML is the exact opposite. It is simply designed to tag content, to say what this is, with no regard to what it looks like. So it's
SVG is XML. Just throwing the panel in.
Yes, correct.
The semantics of SVG are visual.
Correct.
There's two other things. The first is SQL has provided a sort of standard for databases. And if you're storing serious data, you store it in SQL if it's big, and as JSON if it's small, because these have become, they have the social as well as the technical requirements of a standard, which is money is money only because people treat it as money. I'm talking about physical money for convenience, but if my £5 note was no longer accepted by anybody, because we were under occupation by a foreign power, then it would no longer be money. If PDF was not accepted by people, it would no longer be a format of record that would be used in the future. There's another point, which is if it is the form, if you have a format of, if a document is stored in a particular format of record, you can't change the format of record unless you use exceptional methods. It's the same as the type specimen for a biological species. Every biological species has a type specimen and you can't change it. So it's not a question of replacing PDF as the format of record for documents. The documents for which PDF is the format of record will continue to have that as the format of record. And part of that is what being archival means. But allowing other sorts of things, which is why I talked about Lean in the future. Lean can be a format of record for a mathematical proof.
Okay.
And the test that you have a valid copy is that the proof assistant says that you have a valid proof.
Okay. My point was a very pragmatic point in that literally, if you go to any publisher site, you see, as long as you have access to that paper, first you see the HTML, and invariably you say, oh, download the PDF. So yeah. In pragmatic, you've got these two things, and these have to be the same. They've got to be the same. And if they're not the same, the publisher needs to be able to say, it's their responsibility to say, no, it's X squared or X cubed. If they can't, in the old days, you're right. In the old days, we had a piece of paper, and that was the format, the version of record, and there was one format. So you could say, yeah, PDF. And in the early days, it was PDF. There wasn't even HTML on the web. So that was it. Now we have a new problem now because we have different formats.
Oh, print is marvelous. It can produce multiple identical copies of the same piece.
Exactly. Yeah.
Stamping out a cookie.
Yeah. But we're not satisfied with that now. We want to have the PDF, which is like the print, but I'm sorry, we want the HTML. I want to, rotate my,
Well, it's worse than that. We want something that can be stored on what used to be called magnetic media. It's no longer magnetic, but you know what I mean.
Yes, yeah.
And we want, because that gives us the reproducibility we want. With print, you say, what's the print run? And then that's the end of the reproducibility.
Yeah.
Whereas we want to be able to copy and electronically transmit and stuff. Yeah. And now we've got a whole new problem, which is that one needs a way of converting the electronic media into something physical that people can read or hear. Right. Now, I'm going to give you a bit of news that sort of surprised me, if I can find the person's name. It's related to Don Knuth's Kyoto Prize. He got a Kyoto Prize for his work on digital typography. It's the beginning section, nice essay on his lecture. in his book on digital typography. Well, recently, the person that established the Kyoto Prize died. He was a tremendously successful, and I think it seems ethical, Japanese businessman whose name is Ayana Mori. And if I turn this camera, you can see up there by the light on the top of the cupboard, laser printer. Kyoto Ceramics.
Okay.
That was one of the companies, Kyocera, that Ayana Mori brought about. So it's a combination of computer monitors and laser printers, which are both electronic devices taking electronic inputs, that allow PDF to succeed as a system of record, but it doesn't allow XML to succeed as a system of record without a suitable rendering, unless you print the raw file, which sort of doesn't quite work because there is a machine proof I discovered that's about a terabyte long. There's a real mathematical result whose proof is about a terabyte long. That's by and by. So I'm fully with you, Kaveh, in terms of this being an important problem to solve.
Great. Well, nice to be in agreement, Jonathan. But yeah, love to discuss further, and it's an important. You're absolutely right. Yes, important problem to solve.
It's part of the tradition of print and learning that tech is part of, just as the uniformity across time and space of its computations, its typesetting. And I think one of the real challenges we have is not preserving LaTeX or preserving paper or preserving tech. It's preserving values that have been transmitted in this way. Of course, we need things. You can't drink a cup of tea without a cup. You have to have a cup or some other vessel to drink a cup of tea. But it's the tea that's the important thing.
Okay, the tea, for me, the tea is the information. And just a very quick point that came to mind. We talk about, which is the format of record, which is the phrase I used for, is it the PDF, HTML, etc. Now, the beauty of having something like XML, the description of that information as the format of record, is that you can create different things that look different. You can create something, for example, if someone's dyslexic, there is a font called Open Dyslexic. You press a button and you get a dyslexic output, but you know that the information is the same. You can create a PDF with the normal standard double column, etc. You can create different colors. You might say, I want all my maths to be red, for example. So that's the advantage we have in having the record, the absolute format of record, as I call it, to be an electronic form. That's the advantage we have over the old days. If we are not, the pagination might change, but we know the description is in that XML. And we can go as far as we like. We can have semantics. So you can describe, instead of being ideally, why do we have the world's information encapsulated in terms of the italic, bold, or small caps or whatever? We should describe it, that this is a vector. This is a I don't know, name of a species, for example. So you can have all kinds of semantics in there, and you say, yeah, I want to read it in the old way, or I want it read out to me to tell me that this is not just italic, but no, the author meant, sorry, it's a bit of a rant, but it's actually far more exciting to have this description, then have it in any way you like.
We need the tools, and we have some of the tools, but I don't think we have all of the tools to turn XML into a very widespread medium of record. I think it's
no. We have the, forgive me. We have the tools. What the major problem is to have that structured information in the first place, the XML, if you like. It could be any other format. Once you have that information, once you've described things clearly electronically, the tools going from there, you can have that. Those we have. That is relatively easy. But it's the problem now, for say for arXiv, is how we go from a text file that someone's used, you know, a 20-year-old class file for, but gives you a beautiful PDF. How do we get that content into a structured semantic, as nearly semantic as we can for?
Let me give you an example. CTAN, the Tech Archive. Sebastian is a great proponent of XML. In fact, he was a proponent of SGML before that.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a humanities person. And the Text Encoding Initiative uses XML as its as its medium of record.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the major academic users of XML in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's something called resource description framework, which is a way of describing resources. There's an XML schema. And as I recall, CTAN stroke Tech Live used the RDF XML format for its data. Now, I don't know what's happened on Tech Live, but on CTAN, but on Tech Live, I think it was Carl Berry and Norbert Prienig stripped all of that out and replaced it by the stuff that Red Hat uses for its RPM modules.
Mm-hmm.
David is making an expression that I would dare not interpret, but I invite him to speak.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm familiar with RPMs a little bit. But...
Perhaps that's something worth investigating, is our own attitudes towards XML. I think what would really help this discussion go forward, Kaveh, would be a catalogue, if you like, some examples. It doesn't have to be exhaustive, but some examples where XML is clearly recognized as the format of record. Is that the record? Is that the statement word you used?
I said the format of record. That's my phrase. Because the version of record is what everyone uses. The version of record of a publication. You know, what I'm saying is you've got a version of record, but I go to your site. You've got HTML and PDF. What happens? You know, which is the version of record? You know. Yeah.
Okay, so any version of record must have a format of record.
Got it.
And so to find areas where the format of record, of the version of record, is XML. Examples of where it's succeeded. Because I'm sure
there are very few. Okay, I can only tell you from what we do. So we do, you know, we create.
Not necessarily publishing, just anywhere.
Yeah. Okay, that's a very good idea. Yeah.
Because then that allows us to meet our community of users. So I would think that the pretext people use XML as their version of record, in the sense that they use XML as their vast, you know, their native system. But you'll be surprised at how widespread JSON is as the format of record. And a challenging area would be things like Jupyter Notebooks. What do they use? And I think they use JSON, but I don't know. Yes, David, what would happen if somebody wanted to submit their scientific paper as a Jupyter Notebook?
They wouldn't be too happy. But actually, Jupyter Notebooks have come up. in discussion.
I'll come up in discussion. They haven't been published yet.
No, that would take a little bit of work. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be nice to identify the demands and the blockers for just not in a widespread authoritative way, but just, you know, an anecdotal survey. That might be interesting. I think we're at the stage where some good examples would be very helpful.
Yeah, I don't have much experience. I have no experience outside of publishing, but of course, XML is not just for publishing. It would be interesting to see where it is used. All I can say is in the publishing world, we use it ourselves as our format of record, if you like. The publisher gets XML, HTML, PDF. We create the XML first. We press the button, we get the HTML and the PDF. We give it, we give the XML usually and the PDF to the publisher. The publisher convert the XML to HTML, which is easy. But we can, you know, sleep well because we know that HTML, that XML and PDF are absolutely this. They match. There is no way you can have it X cubed and X squared. So we use it as our in-house format of record.
But the publisher treats the PDF as the real thing.
Sorry?
But the publisher treats the PDF as the real thing.
Not necessarily, but the readers do. Yeah, that exactly. Most people do because we are still used to that, which is fine because it's a thing. Yeah, sorry, Phil, I uploaded. I'm going to paste this else to everyone. I'm just pasting a couple of links to this presentation that I talked about in case you're interested. Yeah.
Just a remark and a question. With some journals, the author submits something in LaTeX, and if you go to the journal website, you get a PDF version and an HTML version. But in between, they convert the LaTeX to some often proprietary format and produce the stuff from that. So internally, that's probably the format of record for the journal or whatever. But should the company which supports this proprietary format go away, then there probably no official proprietary format anyone can actually do anything with. I think Nelson mentioned once something like that, where the university had a lot of investment in some proprietary product and then the company went away, and it was a big problem. And often some journals say, well, we require you whatever to link to the version of record. And what they usually mean is just an HTML page, which has links to PDF to HTML, which might even be generated on the fly. But nobody really knows what they use internally. And I think in some cases, it's actually some format which is supported by some program which some people in the Philippines use or whatever. But that's really not something which is stable in the long term.
Yeah. I thank you for that, Philip. I can tell you because I'm in the industry, if you like, typesetting industry. So there's a format people call the typesetting file. The typesetting file is, suppose you use InDesign to typeset pages. Your typesetting file is the InDesign file, which is not open. It's a proprietary close. There are other things. That 3B2 is the sort of well-known, industrial, expensive, macho pagination language. But that you need 3B2 to run it. You need InDesign to run it. So actually, it doesn't matter what you use. What I'm saying is, what you need is the file that drives your PDF or HTML, say PDF. It should be the XML that you're getting from us. So if that goes into InDesign, converted to InDesign automatically and PDF is generated, that's fine. But in most cases, that's not the case. It goes into InDesign, you press the button, InDesign might give you an XML and a PDF, but if there's any pagination changes, then you go into InDesign, you change the pagination, and that might be different from the XML. So it's just dangerous. So we said 25 years ago, we are going to go from XML or HTML in those days directly to PDF. So that's the idea.
It's now 2 hours since we started, which is a great compliment.
Yeah,
Fantastic compliment.
it is fantastic. Thank you so much, Jonathan, and everyone else has been.
And it's clear that when I come to process the video recording, I'll have to chop it up into pieces because. But just to allow things to come to some sort of conclusion, I'd like Kaveh to say concisely what topic he would like, or topics he would like to have discussed at a future tech hour.
Oh goodness, no pressure. Well, this business is very important. As you can see, I'm very passionate. So this is one thing about format of record. Accessibility is extremely important. What else?
What sort of people would you like to discuss it with? You don't have to name people, just sort of generic categories.
It'd be great to have publishers, from my point of view, people who, if they want to join, that would be interesting to see, right? I'd like to ask a publisher to say, look, what happens if there's two here and 3 there? Which one do you go for?
Do you think that they would be willing to?
I don't know, because it's tech hour. I can ask. I've got a lot of contacts, and they might
have to record, and it can be an invitation only if you want.
Could be. The only thing is, I don't know, because we are recording. A publisher, someone from a publisher won't be able to talk freely as we are. That's the only thing.
Maybe we could have a panel session, which would be of particular interest to publishers.
Exactly. If it's the well, I have a lot of contacts in
questions from publishers in advance that could be asked anonymously.
Yeah, but fantastic. Yeah. That would.
Does that sound like something that might work?
It would be, because it's the tech hour. It would be the people who deal with tech. So, for example, I know.
To go back time, that would be people like Geety Granger at Wiley.
Geety Granger, yeah. That was a long time ago. That's right. Yes. That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also the small publishing houses, such as the Math Science Research, the Journal of Integer Sequences, the sort of small university publishing houses, and some of the academic scholarly societies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll think about that. Okay. So they could. What you're thinking is they could say what the problems are, or they might have questions, and we can discuss it.
Well, I think we need a panel and we need an audience.
So panel from the publishers, is that right?
No, I'm thinking that certainly the commercial publishers would dearly like to listen, but would are quite reluctant.
Yeah,
exactly. I'm happy for them to attend on that basis.
Yeah, okay.
But allowing people to submit questions anonymously might actually be quite interesting.
Yeah. Or I can talk to them and say, what problems do you have? And say, right, what is your format of record? And if they say, oh, that's a good question, I don't know, that itself, anonymously, we can say, this is what I found. By the way, next week there's the ALPSP, which is a major publishing conference in Manchester. So I'm going there. There are a few there. So if you remind me, so I'll miss next week, but I will.
Okay. Well, you'll be listening. You'll be taking us with you.
Great, fantastic. Yeah. Well, this has been absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan, and everyone else. It's just It's been really good to have the interest from the archive. So thank you, David. And
this has been helpful. I'm hoping that you can help us more.
Oh,
No,
we'd love to. We'd love to.
the
Together
archive-
we can make things
yeah.
better.
Guys, thank you. Fantastic. 2 hours of great geeky talk and enjoyed it. Good night, everyone. Thank you.